Welcome to the Career Coffee Chat live show and podcast. My name is Erin Urban, and I'm a certified executive career advancement coach. What I do is help you remove those pesky roadblocks so you can achieve or impact income and influence. And in today's society, wow, aren't we going through a lot of change right now? Today, we'll be talking a little bit about the genius of non-judgment and, most importantly, what is resilience and how you can be more impactful, not only in others' lives and your career, but for your life, and how to show up in your space most powerfully as your unique, beautiful human beings. So, you unique, beautiful human beings, as you are signing on today, I'd love to welcome you to the show. Please say hi, say where you're from, wherever you're tuning in from around the world. A good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. For those of you listening to the replay later, just know that we are here to help you, and I want to make sure that you can shine the brightest no matter where you are in your life and your career. And we will see any comments or questions that you have. And of course, you're welcome to direct message me and my guest at any time. If you are watching or listening to the podcast later, please give us a thumbs up, a like, or a great comment about how you like the podcast, and share with your network as well. So when you tune in, please say hi, say your name, or say where you're from, and don't be shy. Come on in, ask your questions. We want to hear from you, and we want to hear your thoughts. Good morning, Cornetia, tuning in from Spring, Texas. So you may be asking yourself, what is all this genius of non-judgment? Well, we'll be talking today to Leeza Steindorf. Now, she is an amazing person, by the way. I'm very excited to have her here on the number 5 in the Coaches Council Spotlight series on Career Coffee Chat Live and podcast. We'll be talking about how to unleash your potential and gain more clarity, confidence, as well as unlock those opportunities in your life and your career. You might be wondering how people get locked into misery cycles and what to do about it. We'll be talking about that, as well as how to transform crisis into clarity, confidence, and ultimately empower success and balance in your life and your career, as well as how to leverage key tools that ensure you claim your impact and rise above challenges with grace. Now, Leeza, who I'm just thrilled to have her on today, and she's coming in from the wilds of Wyoming, and I'm very jealous about where she is right now. She is an acclaimed career crisis transformation coach, among her many other abilities. She's a seasoned leadership coach, business trainer, consultant, Forbes Coaches Council member, of course, experienced mediator, and former Tony Robbins performance coach and motivational keynote speaker. And most importantly, she's a beautiful human being that has deep, rich knowledge that she's looking forward to sharing with all of us. So good morning, Leeza. Great to have you on the show. I'm
Good
just thrilled
morning.
for you to share space with me today.
Thank you. What a lovely introduction, Erin. It's so wonderful to be with you.
Yeah, and I'm telling everybody who's tuning in that I'm very jealous of your location. She's outside in the beautiful weather, and she's got a vest on because she was like, "Oh, it's cold this morning." I said, I'm in Houston, Texas. It's not cold here.
Yeah, yeah.
Very, very jealous.
Well, you step in the sunshine here, and it gets quite warm. So I'm playing two different weather channels here.
Having 2 different weather events all at once. So for those of you tuning in, please say hi, say where you're from, and don't be shy with your questions or comments, because, Leeza, I have a question for you. When it comes to the amazing work that you've done, not only with corporations, but also with individuals, what inspired you to start that journey in the beginning? Because a lot of us, we didn't go to college like, I'm going to be a coach. That's not necessarily how it happens. And I'm interested and intrigued to know, what was that catalyst for you?
I wish I could say there was one single catalyst. I think what became clear to me when I did a lot of my own work and trainings was that everything I had been through, I wanted to have served a purpose. I wanted to be able to have saved someone some of the pain, helped someone have the path be shorter, make their lives somewhat easier by having access to some of the things that I learned and have gone through. So that's really what put me on the path of being a trainer and a coach.
Well, that's great. That's great. And what I find interesting is most people who are coaches in some capacity, they've typically been through something that has been a catalyst, and it has been a life-changing, life-altering, or transformational in some way.
Yes.
And I've noticed that, and then put them on the path to saying, okay, now how can I help other people?
Yeah.
And we have a LinkedIn user. Hi, Kellyanne from Houston, Texas, and she says, please share. What did you go through? I mean, we already have, please share. So do tell us what.
Well, I'll start really at the beginning.
Oh, I think she has frozen, ladies and gentlemen. Until she gets her Wi-Fi sorted out.
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
Again? Okay.
There we are. All right.
So I said I'll start really with the relationship that I have with my father, which is the genesis of not only my work, but also the Genius of Non-Judgement. And both of my parents are really good human beings, very high values, old-fashioned. I was raised in the 60s and in the early 60s. And my father had been in Vietnam. He was a pilot, and he would fly into combat zones and pick up wounded soldiers and dead soldiers, and it was a very high stress, the highest stress I think than anybody could imagine. And when the soldiers came back from that war, it wasn't like it is today. They were really not heralded as heroes, and there was no word for PTSD, but it was there. And so my father brought home with him really the trauma and the pain and the chaos that he had been through into our home. And then he dealt with little girls who, struggled with different things in their lives, in their daily lives. And it just was a big mismatch. And his way of dealing with things was with anger and violence. So that's how I grew up. And the world seemed a very scary and unsure place for me. And I felt very isolated. And I went to anger and power, because that at least gave me the sense that I could control something, right? And I spent a majority of my life that way. And I recognized at some point that it wasn't really applicable anymore, but it was a pattern that had gotten me through. It was my coping mechanism.
Right.
And so then later, I did a lot of work. I came to a lot of resolution, to a certain extent also with my father, and one-sided, I will say. And then I got married and I had children. And when I had my first child, I recognized that everything that I had learned and recovered from and healed from was almost nothing compared to the chaos I was facing with that child, because the way that I had been parented was still programmed.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's then how I started parenting. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not doing it that way. But I had no other tools. I had no other framework. I had no other role models. And there was no book, no class on how to be a parent like I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I started my work all over again. And that's where I did various certifications in mediation, in group facilitation and training, nonviolent communication. I worked for 7 years with Dr. Natalie Rogers, Carl Rogers' daughter, and he was the founder of humanistic psychology. And so my real foundation is in person-centered therapy. And I transformed myself yet again, and also my parenting. And so I went into schools doing that work, and then I wrote a parenting book, and then I ended up going into corporations because people were saying, my gosh, if you can do this here, come help us in our company. So that's kind of a short version of how it evolved.
That's amazing. That's a beautiful story, and thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that when you are faced with, I am now impacting others, whether it be teammates or particularly your children, it's a definite wake-up call to say, I don't want to do that. This is not how I want to be. How can I be different?
Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing is when we that's huge. So first, the recognition, the awareness that something has changed. And I have a 5-step sheet that I go through called SOTA, which is to first see something and to recognize it with the awareness, and then to own your part in it. And then after you've done that, is that you accept and have no judgment about it, which is key. And that's where most people get stuck, right? Especially the self-judgment. And then to make a decision on what is it that from all of the possibilities here, what is the decision that I want to make? And then to take action on that. And so that first awareness of, wait a minute, something's not quite fitting here, or this isn't the way that I want to do it, is huge. And then the next steps are really key in how are you going to make changes or continue forward differently.
Right. And I like to key in on that non-judgment part. I mean, you mentioned that's where people really do get stuck.
Yes.
And can you give those people who are tuning in right now, and those people who may be listening later, what does that mean? And it sounds like a little bit your Genius of Non-Judgement, which you do have some free tools online, which is, you say, is your gift to the world. And we bless you for that, by the way, because it's such a powerful thing. But can you help people understand and wrap their minds around what do you mean by non-judgment? And what does that do?
So I did really years of training, various different trainings, but one of the trainings that I had was at the Option Institute, and they have a beautiful way of presenting non-judgment, and it is so fundamental of basically making a judgment. In the way that I'm using it in this context is to make something good, bad, right, or wrong. So even if I say, wow, you look beautiful today, that's a judgment. Right? I'm creating that. Or the weather here is horrible, another judgment. So the nice ones, the good ones, are not the ones that usually cause us difficulties. It's the ones that where we make things bad or wrong that do. And so the difficulty arises if I say, for example, the weather here is terrible, horrible. And then I continue with that belief, then I'm going to say, well, gee, Wyoming has bad weather where I'm visiting right now. And now that is no longer, with time, with repetition, with conviction, that's no longer now an opinion. It's no longer a judgment. It's now a fact in my mind. Oh, Wyoming, terrible weather. I have now melded my judgment of something and made it a truth, right? So what the Genius of Non-Judgment does is it distinguishes the facts from the meaning that I give the facts. So I can say it's 62 degrees in the shade and it's 85 in the sunshine. Those are facts. They're things that we can measure.
Right.
Everything after that, whether I like it, I don't like it, it's cold, it's hot, it's miserable, it's lovely, that's my interpretation. And that is always valid. It can't be right or wrong, but it's not a truth. It's not a fact. And what happens is we marry those two and say, oh, it's terrible. And then there's the truth. And so if we come back to where a lot of our difficulties in relationship come from in growing up, and that is what plays itself out in our leadership, in our, whether we're an employer, an employee, a colleague, team leader, team participant, whatever it is, what's playing out is the beliefs that we laid down early in life, and then we came to believe they were truths. Right? So if we heard, you're stupid, let's say you couldn't do a math problem clearly, right? And a parent says you're stupid. So it's not that you got wrong, some algorithm that those numbers were incorrect, which is a fact. Because numbers, right? But then somebody said you're stupid. Oh, I'm stupid because I didn't get that algorithm correct. So now I'm carrying around in my mind, I'm stupid, and that's a truth. Then, so then I'm in a team lead situation, and one of my team members says, "What, are you stupid? That's a ridiculous question or decision or whatever it is," and I'm right back there. Oh yes, I'm stupid. So now I'm dealing with what I think is a truth, rather than, why do you think that's a stupid idea? Like, tell me about that, right? You can't even go to curiosity because you're occupied with your own judgments that are so ingrained in you.
That's absolutely correct. And then it brings me back. I don't know if anybody tuning in can relate to this. If we have any judgments, particularly self-judgments, that may be burdens that were put on us, right? Take, for example, lately I've been dealing a lot around fear and scarcity. Why is that coming up for me? And a lot of anxiety. And I started really trying to focus, okay, first of all, why am I dealing with this anxiety? What is it? Because anxiety comes in different flavors, okay? Now, general anxiety, it has to have a catalyst that's causing the anxiety. So what is it? So I started thinking of, when did this start? Well, it started about the time when my mother moved down to Texas. It's like, well, that's odd because I love my mother. I'm glad she's near. So why is that causing me anxiety? And then I started thinking, oh, it's because my mother, wonderful person, but very much a fear and scarcity mindset. So when she sees something, no matter what it is, fear and scarcity comes out. in all of the language she uses, the context she sees, it's all fear and scarcity, fear and scarcity. Now, this is something that had worked very hard over the years,
right,
to program out of my mindset. And here it is again. Now I have to deal with it, really deal with it. Realize that it's not me. Like I do not have to accept this way of being, that I can say, okay, this is a burden that I don't have to carry. It is not mine.
Nice. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'll share with you, those for you, Leeza, and those of you tuning in now or later, when I set that aside, when I recognized what it was and that it was not mine to carry, I literally almost passed out from the relief.
Yeah.
I'm really serious.
Sure.
I undid, and I just was like, oh my God.
Right. And that's such a great thing, because we go around thinking it's so incredible. I always say, so let's say that there's a person by the name of Tim Buck in South America, and Tim Buck says he doesn't like your hair. Would you care? It's like, well, I don't know, Tim Buck, and what do I care? Okay, let's say your partner doesn't like your hair. Ooh. Oh, well, then there's a problem. Well, why is that? Where's the difference? Right? It's the weighting that we're giving. Well, this person said it, right? That has to have value, impact, that must mean something. And we are infusing it with that, right? So you saying, oh, this isn't even mine. It belongs to somebody else, and being able to put that down, it's really powerful.
Yeah, I had a guest on a number of months ago, and she was talking about familial structures when it came to emotional DNA. Fascinating work, very, very trending. It's very new, and neuroscience and other quantum physics, I mean, a whole host of things. But her hypothesis was that we tend to carry burdens based on our familial structure, particularly undealt with pain, anger, trauma, etc. So I was like, well, that's very interesting, because for a long time, like you, Leeza, my coping mechanism was anger and control, right? And I didn't understand why, because I had a very good childhood. I just didn't have any problems. So I really started peeling back the layers of the onion and discovered that my grandfather on my father's side, very angry, created a lot of emotional trauma within his family nexus. I never experienced that, but my father did. He was in World War II as a tank. Now, he signed up as in the cavalry thinking he was going to ride horses. That's not at all what happened. He drove tanks over people. Yeah, not good. And he came back traumatized from that. And the theory was that the anger that was undealt with by his children, my father and his brothers, then skipped to me. What's interesting is when I recognized that and I released that burden, same thing, I almost passed out from the relief.
Well, it's interesting. There's a lot in what you just said that I'd like to speak to, if I may. The familial or generational trauma and pain energetically absolutely exists. And if one is prone to or able to work at that level, it's amazing. What I find is that if we can't or don't want to work at that level, on a practical level, what's mine? What have I seen? What am I, like I said, my coping mechanism became, if I yelled, sometimes I didn't get hit, or sometimes I avoided something, or at least if I could yell, I knew I was going to still breathe. Like it was existential for me.
Right.
So that was this lifetime. But it wasn't until I really unpacked that I understood it. And the interesting thing, in coming back to something you said about your mom and anxiousness, is that in my book, and I try and simplify things because I can get so super complex about just about anything, that fear has many, many, many different flavors. Anxiety, worry, concern, it's all fear. Let's just take all that and put it in a bucket of fear. And I have a talk called Fearlessly Unstoppable, Flipping Fear for Good on SoundCloud, which I'm also happy to share. That's also
that'd be great
for free. And basically, fear is what we don't want. And so we move away from it. If we can just identify what we don't want, right? For example, perhaps you didn't want to have the same mindset as your mother, or you didn't want to feel like there was lack or scarcity in your life, right? If that's a not want, then we just flip that over and, well, what's the want?
Right.
I want to have my own thoughts. I want to be the author of my own internal landscape and my own belief systems and meanings that I give to things. And so how do I go about doing that, which is what you did so wonderfully. So we have the generational, the ancestral heritage that's absolutely there, and I am involved with the Cree Nation, and I very much recognize and appreciate our ancestral history, and also into the future where we're going with it. And at the same time, come down to the individual and is, what can I do here now? What can I understand about myself and how I operate here and now, not only for my own path, but also to change that ancestral pattern, right? And that can be done here, even if I don't understand what had come before.
Absolutely. And I think that's where so many people just keep reliving and rehashing things because they don't understand the power that they have and they hold in their hands. You have the ability to change. You're not fixed. You're not just what your parents made you. You're not even whatever mindset you decided to establish based on your judgments and your biases about yourself and your environment.
That's right.
It's all malleable. It can change, and we have the power to do it. And what's interesting, you hit on something there. Instead of focusing on what you don't want, it's not that we don't want to acknowledge it. We need to be aware. But instead of spending your time focusing on what you don't want, which is typically what we do, how about we shift it to what we do want? Because we don't spend enough time wrapping our language and our mindset and our focus around what we want in our lives. We tend to spend a lot of time focused on what we don't want, which, by the way, the more you focus on what you don't want, the more you're likely to attract it to yourself.
So it's interesting. You were introduced the conversation today also around resilience, and what we've gone through globally over the last year is a great indicator of how the world can show up in such a powerful way and make us feel like we are at the mercy of that. And I actually, on once a week, I started, when the pandemic started, a group called Unshakable, where we do guided visualization, and we speak about what can we create, groom, enhance within ourselves or in our lives that give us that spirit and that energy to deal with whatever comes to us. And the way that I look at resilience, if you look at, for example, the picture that always comes to my mind is a duck and the water rolling off its back, right? It's like the water comes, it's not like it doesn't get touched, but it just rolls off. Now, if it were that simple, we'd all be in great shape, but it is possible to do that. And you were talking about just now about we don't pay attention to what we want. We've been taught not to. We've been taught, you don't want this, you want that. You don't want this, you want that, from our teachers, our often religious institutions, our parents, friends, social organizations, the media, whatever it is. It's, oh, you don't want this, you want that. You don't want this drink, you want that drink. You don't want this car, you want that car. You don't want this bathing suit, you want that bathing. You don't want this body, you want that body. So we're constantly been given information of whatever it is that we naturally feel like, oh, I want that. No. We have to check outside of ourselves. So resilience, the way that I experience it, is what I call internal orientation. Where am I oriented? Am I oriented externally? So I hear on the news, and I'm not going to get political at all because it's not political, that there's a virus, that we've heard this in the news. And then there are vaccines, and now the hospitals are full. And a lot of that is fact. But then we're not sure, well, what's fact? This person says this is fact. The other person says that's fact. Well, what do I believe? And how do I orient myself? And that's where the breakdown comes, because we're trying to orient externally in an environment that's moving. It's like a moving target.
Right.
So a lot of people, a lot of my clients are like, I don't know what to believe. I don't know what to do. And there's such fear, and it's understandable, right? People don't want to go into public. They're not wearing a mask. They are wearing a mask. They're not vaccinated. They are vaccinated. Just what do we do? And so what I encourage them to do is, let's come back to internal orientation. What do you recognize about yourself? What is your value system? What facts do you know that you can rely on for your own decision-making process? And with the values you have and the wants that you have, what decisions do you want to make? Yes, but out there, they leave that for a moment. I'm not saying ignore the external world, but start here. Start internally, because that is where resilience comes. And when you're anchored here, when you're oriented internally, then you can experience the world out there as you wish to, rather than having the world tell you how you're supposed to be experiencing the world.
Oh, that's so powerful. That is so powerful. You just shared extremely powerful information, because so many people do not anchor internally. They are not in touch with, they don't have clarity in that space.
Yeah.
And they're just being bounced around from one media source to another social post to this to that. And it's creating additional stress, additional anxiety. Just overcomplicating.
Yes.
And I'm not saying it's not a complex time. I'm not saying there's not change out there. I'm not saying we should ignore, as you mentioned, ignore the outside factors. But we don't have an internal compass.
Yes.
How are you going to know where to even start?
And this is where, exactly, Erin, and this is where the vicious cycle seems to be unchangeable, because, well, okay, so Leeza says, well, let's have internal orientation, right? Or Erin's telling me, okay, well, what's your internal anchor? That sounds really great, but I was never taught how to listen to myself. And how can I trust myself? Because everybody's always told me I'm wrong. That's when we have the freedom to say, okay, even if I'm wrong. I thought this morning, I was playing flute this morning, and I've just started playing a recorder. I've never played in my life. I used to play trombone. I love music. I've never played a recorder. So here I am playing a recorder by myself. And as I'm playing, I'm trying different things. And the thought occurred to me, you've got to be willing to make the wrong notes. You've got to be willing to sound bad. You have to. Because if I'm teaching myself, the only way I'm going to be able to figure out what sounds good is trying it all. And trying it all means some of it was like, ooh, that didn't sound very good, right? And to do it again. And then it was like, oh, that sounds a lot better. And the more I do it, the less I'm having those really off ones. But I had to be willing to do those. And so in turning internally, in having that internal orientation, and from this orientation moving outward, I've got to be willing to say, okay, I've not done this before. I don't know if this feels right or not, but by golly, I'm going to do it because it's my decision. And taking that courage, and even if it's off or you make a mistake, so what? Because the next time, the third time, the 12th time, the 130th time, it's going to feel so natural to you. And then you're going to be able to say, okay, everybody out there is saying this, but boy, this feels right to me. And then you're living a life that feels really good to yourself.
Right.
That's empowerment, is what it is.
It is truly. And what's interesting is you touched a little bit on the genius of non-judgment there. You gave yourself permission.
Absolutely.
You didn't say, oh, that bad note, that's bad. That means I'm bad. That means I can't do it. Right.
Well,
so it's taking that away from him, saying, wait a minute, it just is.
It's so great that you said that, right? Because there was no bad note. You're right. You caught me in saying the same thing. There's no bad note. There's no wrong note. There's just that note that makes me go, ooh. And then there's the other note that goes, ah.
Right.
So there is no right or wrong note. There can't be. And I use the example often with my clients is that if you are in Denver and you want to take a bus to Cheyenne, Wyoming, for example, and you get on a bus that takes you to Kansas City, you've not taken the wrong bus. The bus can't be wrong. You just took the bus that took you in a direction that you did not decide to go. You actually wanted to go to Cheyenne. So the next time you'll take the bus that goes to Cheyenne. But the bus to Kansas City was not wrong. It just was the bus that went to Kansas City. Right? And so it's the same thing with notes or whatever it is. A partnership, a job that you decide to take, a dress that you buy, whatever, a meal you get at a restaurant. It can't be wrong or bad. It's just, as you just said, there's that, right? It's what it is.
Right, it is. And I think that people struggle with that because we're taught to make judgments about situations, scenarios, things, experiences.
Yes.
Very, very young age.
Yes.
And about ourselves, because other people judge us, and we think, oh, well, that's maybe what I should do. And then it just starts escalating. So when we're in a situation, we'll say, well, that's good or that's bad, or we start making judgments. Well, I love this quote by Shakespeare, and I know you're familiar with quote, and I will probably misquote miserably. But nothing is either good nor bad, except thinking that makes it so.
Correct. That's right. That's beautiful. And the reason, but and let me take us off the hook here, okay? Because we put ourselves on the hook. It's like, well, gosh, and then we judge judgment. Well, how could you be so stupid as to judge that? Like, there you are judging again. Oh my gosh, right?
I'm judgy.
Right. And so the thing is this: we judge to validate what we want. Right? So the example I usually use is chocolate, because I love chocolate. It's like, oh, well, that's bad if I have chocolate today because I haven't exercised today. Tomorrow I can have chocolate tomorrow because that'll be a good day because I will have exercised. So the desire to have chocolate, it can't just be what I want. I have to back it up with all these judgments. Either the chocolate is good or the chocolate is bad, or exercising is good or exercising bad, or I'm good because I exercise, so now I get to have chocolate. Right? Instead of just saying, I'd like a piece of chocolate. And we don't do that. We did that as kids. It's like, I want that. Every child's like, oh, I want that. When they get to about the age of 6 or 7, it's like, oh, I don't know if I want that, right? Well, when they're small, they know exactly what they want. And often when I work with teens, it's like, how do you feel about that? I don't know. If you had a thought about how you felt about that, what would you guess? Well, I guess I could be sad, right? But they don't even know how to identify anymore with their own experience because they have so divorced themselves from it because of judgments. That's allowed, that's not allowed. And so what I come down to is your experience, your meaning that you give a fact is always valid. You may think 62 in the shade is wonderful. I might find 62 in the shade cold. Neither one of us is right or wrong. They're simply valid. But the fact that it's 62 in the shade is correct, is a fact correct according to the thermometer. Exactly.
Right. But the judgment we give it is just our personal set point.
And we can change that. So if we come back to our circumstances that we've had in this last year, and it's been a challenge, right? And that's why I started that weekly group to help people, because all the influx of information, and then of course, because people were quarantined, they were dependent on that information, right? They couldn't even talk to their neighbor or whatever. I mean, it was difficult. And so if you go back to just facts and you say, okay, these are the facts I've been given, you can create your own beliefs. And people say, oh, how could you create a belief that this is the best thing that ever happened? I'm not saying I'm glad that we've gone through this, but what I do know as I look at the things that have happened is that people are paying attention now to our health, to our social engagement, to our planet, to how our politicians are making decisions. Like, that awareness is so acute, and that's come through this pandemic. So am I saying the pandemic is a great thing? Absolutely not. But I'm looking at the value that it's offered us, how we all are dealing with it, as something that we can utilize to move forward with. So that's the skew that I give it, starting from my internal orientation and then looking outwards.
And it's interesting, as I mentioned in my post yesterday, that before the live show, because it just came to me, I was like, what is resilience really? You want to peel back the layers of the onion and really distill it down.
Right.
Because as human beings, not only do we have these social layers of judgment, and this is good and that is bad and da, but we also have a natural human negative bias. And that's through evolution.
You think so?
Most people, not everybody, most people are inclined to look at things from more of a cautious, fear-based standpoint. That's what scientists theorize based on evolution, because those cave people who saw the saber-toothed tiger and ran away survived more. So there you go. The theory is. So,
I'm going to want to comment on that, but go ahead.
Yeah. So that's the theory. That's some people's theory. Not everybody's theory, but some people's theory.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to it, your resilience is whether or not, one, are you aware of your bias? Is it more positive or negative? In regards to evolution, where are you When a situation occurs, are you, oh my God, this guy is falling? Or are you, okay, well, that's interesting. Now what can I do?
Right. Absolutely. And so I'd like to go back to the saber-toothed tiger, because I think that there is an attachment of a belief there that doesn't necessarily belong there. So, and the belief is that if you run away from the saber-toothed tiger, you're afraid. I'm going to counter that.
Okay.
If you run away from the saber-toothed tiger, it's that you want to stay alive. You don't have to be afraid of the saber-toothed tiger. You don't have to be afraid of a semi-truck in the middle of the highway. You just need to know that will lead to death. This will keep me alive.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, and this is what I teach in Fearlessly Undaunted, when we engage with fear, when we add fear to a factual situation, we actually handicap ourselves, because what happens from our physiological evolution is that when we are fearful, we go into fight, flight, or freeze.
Right.
So all of our blood is going to our limbs, and we are ready to either, take that saber tooth on.
We're not thinking.
Or go the other. We cannot access our frontal lobe. It's not possible. We're back in our reptilian brain. When our nervous system calms, when we look at the facts, then we have access to our cognitive thinking, and only then. That's why they say never make a decision when you're fearful or when you're traumatized, because you literally
can't access your frontal lobe.
You can't.
And I see that with people who are coaching through burnout.
Exactly. And that's why, so to calm that nervous system, so I encourage people to separate out fear from prudence. Like if I see a bear or a lion coming at me, I'm going to act appropriately, but I'm not going to start being afraid, because that's going to limit myself in my ability to respond to it. And if we look at evolution, so there's a doctor by the name of Dr. Keltner, and he founded at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, he founded the Greater Good Science Center. And he has made it his life work to study Darwin's theory of evolution. And here's the interesting thing, because what you said, and I'm not countering you, Aaron, as much as science, really. Up to the, let's say, the last decade or two, science stopped where they believed Darwin stopped, which was the survival of the fittest. And actually, that wasn't even Darwin's coinage. That was a scientist who studied Darwin who said it was the survival of the fittest. So what Darwin found in the middle of his career was that the stronger ones, or the ones that were smarter or could run away from the saber tooth, they were the ones that survived. But here's the interesting thing: toward the end of his studies, what do you call it? Experimentation, he discovered something, and this is what Dr. Keltner, and you can look this up, it's phenomenal information, and he has excellent videos on YouTube about it. He discovered that it's the organisms and the species that worked together, that recognized unity. They are the ones that actually survived and made evolutionary leaps. And there's something in the human body, it's called the vagus nerve, and it starts somewhere around here and it goes outward, and it's responsible for our wanting to do good, for wanting to take care of people, for wanting to act out of kindness. And the more developed that is, the more willing people are to work with one another. And that actually, and as we're seeing today, right, the more divided we are, the less capable we are going to be.
The less capable we are, the less productive we are. Right. Absolutely.
Exactly. But our coming together, the people saying, wait a minute, how can we do this together? How can we work together, even with differing viewpoints, differing value systems, differing religious views? If we work together, how can we make this happen? So I do believe that science is going to slowly catch up to what the facts were, rather than having gotten arrested at a certain point in Darwin's evolution theory. So please forgive me, with all due respect.
No, that's great. I was just putting it out there. I'm glad you caught it. You latched onto that, because while they theorize that our initial response is automatic, what you do with it is within your control.
Exactly. Yes.
So if you do, let's just say, have a deep-seated fear of heights. For whatever reason, I don't even know why. I didn't experience anything in my childhood. No idea. At one point in my life, I realized I had a deep-seated fear of unsupported heights, like metal stairways 20 stories up, for example. Not my thing. Like my limbic system goes on a hyper overdrive. We're going to shut you down. Like you can't breathe, you can't move, you freeze. And it takes concentrated cognitive effort to force myself beyond it. But I can do it. It's not
easy. Amazing. That's amazing.
It's not easy. It can be done. I can force myself. So like say there's a swinging bridge.
Well, and I can imagine that's one of your one part of your secret sauce as such a great coach, Erin, in your work is you can do that, right? So if somebody comes to you with whatever fears or anxiety they have, you can help guide them out of that because you know what that pathway has been for yourself, right?
Right. Well, and I give people, and it's free, this emotional diagnostics tool in my Managing Mindset and Emotions guide. And it helps people in any situation. Let's just say, you don't respond well to certain situations and you would just like to respond better. You can start to map what triggers you, become more aware. So then you can start to create different habits, different ways of thinking and preempt these scenarios and be prepared. Take, for example, my husband is an engineer's engineer. So if you look up engineer in the dictionary, you see his face, here he is smiling. Yeah, he's a wonderful guy. I love him dearly. He is he's a complete angel.
Now he's fact-based.
Yeah, and that's totally fact-based. Oh, he's very fact-based. Well, no.
Oh, okay.
You're a human being. You are not fact-based.
Okay.
Not usually. Because I'll come up with very logical scenarios. Okay, there is absolutely no reason for example, he wants to seal, we're creating a new shop, and he wants to put epoxy flooring down. I was like, okay, well, there's no technical reason why you need epoxy flooring. You could just do this. And he's like, no, because he's emotionally attached to epoxy flooring. So anyway. So even though he's an engineer, it doesn't matter. But
it's an interesting thing to be attached to, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, when he's attached to ideas of things.
Okay.
Yeah. That's certain symbols of you.
Sure, we all do.
Yeah, I mean, we all do, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we all, well, not we all do, but a lot of people tend to be attached to certain symbols of success. Right? That also tends to handcuff us to a certain way of being. Like, I must have the 3,000 square foot home in the right neighborhood and drive a BMW or two and have 3.5 kids or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, here we are shackled to this way of being that is actually not true and authentic to us. Like for me, before I exited corporate, I knew it was coming because I was rising, trucking up the ladder, and realized that, wait a minute, I'm not living a dream for me. I'm living a dream for someone else.
Right.
I'm living a dream for what society expects. And I was like, that's not what I want to do. So I had that check in again. So, but to trim all that away, what I'd love to do before we wrap up is to, have something people can take away. So we've talked a lot about really great information today and very deep topics. But we'd love to give something for people to start to understand, okay, if I want to leverage the tools of the Genius of Non-Judgement, which, by the way, is available on Leeza's website, which you can find by either connecting them through her on LinkedIn or checking out this handy dandy banner down here at the bottom if you're watching live. How can I get started? Maybe I don't want to live in fear. Maybe I want to be more fact-based. Maybe I want to have more resilience in the moment. If I want more resilience, what does that look like for me? What are some tactical tips?
Well, I think that there are two things that I'd like to offer. And somebody in the chat said there are people that are climbing and in the workplace, and how do we deal with that?
Right.
And I think the best thing that we can do first is to come back, as I said, internal orientation. So first of all, to anchor in yourself, what is happening? So what are the facts, which is out there, and what am I feeling? What do I want? So to just start differentiating those two, because for the most part, people have those so married together. And it's very hard, right? So my spouse loses their job, I feel terrible. Those are not married, right? The spouse loses their job, I may be relieved, but I don't give myself permission to be relieved because maybe they're upset or whatever it is. So to just start separating out what's happened, what are the facts, and facts are things that are measurable that we can all agree upon. And then what's my experience of those? And to know that your experience is valid. Don't judge it, don't make it wrong, sit with it. Just that sounds so simple, is a huge piece that we can do. And then the second thing is to get support. That if you are dealing, if it's overwhelming, if you can't separate those two things out easily, or if the externals feel so overwhelming, or even the internals very often, then look for support, whether it's in books, coaching, a spiritual community, that you're not alone. Because I think that this last year, the people that are dealing with so much anxiety, burnout, stress, is because everybody feels that we're alone. We've become so isolated in our teeny little cubicles, rather than understanding we are all connected, and we are always connected, even if our physicality may be challenged at the moment. So those would be my two things, is to separate out what are the facts and what's my experience of them, and give yourself permission to really tease those apart and know that your experience is valid. And the second thing is really to look for support systems that feed you, give you nourishment, whether it's kayaking or playing the flute or coaching with Aaron or whatever it is, things that really build you up from the inside out. And that's going to build your resilience, not trying to control what's going on out there.
Yes, that's beautiful, because there's so much we can't control. We live under this illusion that we can control all these things. And in reality, the only thing we can truly control is our response to situations. That's
Absolutely.
it. You can't control anything else.
This is true.
And then being okay with that. So for those of you who are high achievers like I am, we struggle with that. Struggle with letting go, struggle with a lot of things, but the control being one of it. Being a high achiever and wanting to have this, whatever our goals are, whatever judgment we put on where we need to be, and being able to let go and be at peace with where we are, and retain hope.
Yes, and you've just said something. When I work with people, and you speak of high achievers, that's usually who I end up working with, is that let's redefine achievement. What if achievement means the highest state of well-being for yourself?
Right.
If that is achievement, then everything else shifts, right? It's not physical and it's not external. If being an achiever, if achieving the best that you can is a high state of well-being for yourself, and you orient yourself according to that, then a lot of those things fall away.
That's true. Yeah. And being shackled to someone else's idea of success, because that's often what happens, is high achievers get attached to family expectations or spouse expectations or peers or society. And then they're performing to some level of existence that is not their own. That was me. That was me many years ago. Wow. And when I woke up and realized that's not achievement for me.
Right.
For me, that's other people.
Yes.
That's letting the outside drive me, like we were talking about earlier. Taking my sense of accomplishment and well-being based on other people's opinions and thoughts. My own.
Exactly right. And when we switch that definition of achievement to the highest state of well-being for oneself, then you're going to follow what's your definition of success, and what feels right to you.
Very different. Yeah. And much more rewarding, satisfying.
Absolutely.
I mean,
that's where the juice is.
Yeah. Well, Leeza, it's been such a pleasure.
Oh, likewise. Thank you, Erin.
Show. It's been wonderful. Hopefully all of you tuning in either now or later have enjoyed our conversation. And hopefully if you do, please don't hesitate. You have a question, you have a thought, you're not quite sure how to unpack what's going on, please do check out Leeza's tools. I know she has some wonderful insights. Connect with her on LinkedIn. Reach out to either one of us with questions or whatever you have going on in your mind, because we have a lot going on right now, a lot of complexity that we may need to unpack and understand how to deal with that, how to interface for our own well-being and to unleash the opportunities that we need in our lives and what to see in our lives based on our center and our clarity. And Just a real quick tip before we go. I mean, the last year has been very interesting. While career clarity was definitely a space that I was coaching in quite frequently, it has accelerated quite a bit. A lot of people are seeking clarity. What are my values and priorities, and how does that drive how I have a career, how I show up in my life, who I want to be? It's so incredible to start to really seek that firm foundation that's based on you and where you want to be. And thank you so much, Leeza, for sharing with us and all the wonderful insights.
My joy. Today. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And for all of you tuning in, either now or later, my biggest wish for you is keep elevating, my friends. Talk soon.